how do we run the process faster? How do we make it leaner? Like how do we do less steps? That's what we're trying to do. We're just only trying to do the half dozen things we really need to do and get rid of all the extraneous stuff, and really to make the process more predictable.
Welcome to Process Pioneers, the show that takes a deep dive into the minds of decision makers, key influencers, and process experts who are pioneering the world of everything process. Welcome to the next episode of Process Pioneers. My name is Daniel Rayner. I'm the host of Process Pioneers, and in each of these episodes, I have the absolute privilege of sitting down with process specialists, experts, practitioners, those that are putting the power of process into their organization on a day-to-day basis. I have the privilege of sitting down with people that come from the academic world, people from the consulting world, and people that are working internally at large organizations. And it really gives quite a broad and diverse experience of how process can transform an organization. And one of the most popular topics that has often been coming up lately is around this idea of process mining. What does that look like? How are organizations using it practically to deliver real tangible value? And that's the topic of today's discussion. That's what we're really going to focus on today. The absolute pleasure of sitting down with Geoff Armstrong, who is the Director of Process Analytics at Tech 150, which is a process mining company. Now, Geoff works with quite a range of large organizations in adopting process mining and getting real value out of it. So a lot to glean from in this conversation. Geoff, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks very much for having me.
So that was obviously a very brief introduction to yourself, and I'm sure the audience wants to understand a little bit more about your background. How did you get started in process mining? Were you already working in the BPM space? Is it something that you were formally qualified in? Tell us a little bit about your journey and what got you where you are today.
Yeah, so I've got a typically convoluted background. I'm an accountant by trade from many years ago with BHP. Accidentally fell into an SAP project 30 years ago, 1991 we started, so it might have been before you were born actually. And that was kind of the start of my SAP career. So we did a steelworks in Wollongong. And it was a fantastic project when no one knew anything in those days. We were just completely green and we got fantastic training. Mm-hmm. And it was all about the process, but the process itself, SAP had already figured out what the process should be to a large extent. So we started working on that project. And then we left BHP and formed a tier 2 SAP consultancy, which ran for about 20 years. We did a lot of large projects. There was a company called Plout. And then about 5 years ago, we accidentally came across a tool set called Celonis. So our CEO at the time was at a conference and ran into a marketing partner, rang us up, so myself and my colleague Henry Fernandez, and said, what do you think about this? And so about 2 minutes after having a look at it, we went, oh my goodness, what in the world have we found here? Mm. And the fascinating thing was that we'd been doing SAP projects, and I was BI practice manager for Plout for about 2 decades. So data was kind of my baby, as well as being like a costing and a finance consultant. And no one had ever looked at the change logs in SAP. They've always been there, so you could always drill down on a field and go, Geoff changed this from this value to that. But no one had ever had a concept of how to actually utilize this. So then we looked at it, and I got a little bit carried away. I actually, so one of your previous presenters, Professor Van der Aalst, who's the godfather of process mining, actually did his MOOC course, which was fascinating, probably a bit too academic for me, but I did it and it was great. And since then, we've done about 10 of these process mining projects around SAP because kind of that's our background. We understand the data very well. Mm. And then about 3 years ago, our Plout company got purchased by Ernst & Young, which is very nice. Thank you, Ernst & Young. And then we did our earn-out. And while we were there, we did a number of really great projects, and Ernst & Young were a Celonis partner as well. And so we did some great projects with those guys. And then this year we finished our time with Ernst & Young, and we've started up Tech 150. So we're a boutique process mining consultancy. We focus on SAP processes. We can do other ones as well, but that's really where our strength is.
Yeah, great. No, thanks for that. That's really interesting. So you've obviously worked with many organisations around this idea of adopting and implementing process mining. What are the general drivers for an organisation to want to adopt process mining? I mean, it's a lot of hype around it at the moment. A lot of people are dipping their toes in the water, so to speak, doing POCs, POVs. What drives an organisation to want to adopt this technology?
Yeah, that's a good question. So whenever a company wants to do anything, they want to get something out of it, and it's either I want more efficiency or I want to take some dollars out. I want to save some dollars. And so the way that you do that from a process mining perspective is using a couple of different high-level techniques. So number one, you need transparency. You need to understand what's going on in the process itself. So for many years, we were doing transformation projects. And really the nub of that is I need to understand where I am. So what's my as is? I need to understand what my to be is. And then I need to figure out the transitional plan. So you can almost think of that, Dan, as being, the as is. I need to have something like a process mining to tell me what's going on. What's really going on? Not just sitting in workshops, which I've done endlessly over the last 30 years. And getting people's opinions, but actually having the facts. And then when we do those workshops, the facts actually really enhances the workshop, and people in the workshops go, "Oh yeah, that's right. Is that right? That's amazing." Then for the to be, that's where a BPM comes in beautifully, right? Mm-hmm. So we've got like the actual model, we've got the theoretical model, and then the transition is basically the change management. How do we go from where we are now to where we want to go to? So that's transparency. The other one, conformance. So conformance is about, with that target model that we've got, are we actually performing to that target model? Yes or no? And in the previous projects that we've done, we always used, not us personally, although I was qualified in ARIS 30 years ago, we'd always work with a team to utilise something like an ARIS, or it could be a GB Tech, or it could be a Signavio, any of those tools, they're all good. And that provided a really good discipline in a large project. But the problem was, once we started executing the transactions, the target models were there was no way to actually know whether we were hitting the target models or not. So the big breakthrough, one of the big breakthroughs with process mining, is the ability to have the target model and then be able to compare it to the actual model to come up with a conformance rate, figure out whether your conformance is getting better or worse, and be able to pull out the things that are creating non-conformances. And so the non-conformance is either I'm doing something that I'm not supposed to do, for example, changing the price on a purchase order, or I'm doing things in the wrong order. So I might be allowed, I'm allowed to have a vendor invoice, I'm allowed to have a goods receipt, but if I actually have the vendor invoice as a starting point before the purchase order, I've done something seriously wrong. And so the tools will allow you to identify where those non-conformances are. That's a massive step forward. And then the third one, where we get great efficiencies, is understanding, how do we run the process faster? How do we make it leaner? Like how do we do less steps? That's what we're trying to do. We're just only trying to do the half dozen things we really need to do and get rid of all the extraneous stuff. And really to make the process more predictable. And if we can do those three things, then we've got a great opportunity to either make the whole process, quicker, leaner, cheaper, save the client some money, which is what we're trying to do. And that's how we're adding value, actually getting the client to change the process so that it's more efficient, it's leaner.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I think that that there's some clear targets or goals that lots of organisations aim for. And with when it comes to process mining, I think one of the hurdles that people have, whether it's just a mindset or whether it's in reality, is what do we need in place to make sure process mining is effective? And the topic of data often comes up. Is do we have good data? Do we have the right data? Are we even in a position to do process mining? Maybe you can touch on that to, I guess, maybe debunk some of these myths or mindsets that people have?
Yeah. So if we think about, there's about 30 different process mining tools on the market, and they're all good in their own way. But just having the tool set, it really doesn't give you anything. As you say, you've got to have access to the data. You've got to have access to the right data. And if we use something, say, SAP procurement, for example, which is our specialty area, there's a fantastic data set sitting there in every SAP client's system, just waiting to be used. Now, a lot of clients say, the data's no good. Great. Give us the data. We'll show you where it's no good, and we'll show you where it is good. And so even though clients have the perception that their data is rubbish, it's stored in a structured way, right? So every client I look at, the purchase order field is the same everywhere. Now, client may have added on a few new fields. No worries, we can deal with that. But the basic structure of an SAP system is fundamentally the same everywhere, except for a few, added extras here and there. So the data one's a really interesting one, because that's one of the big stumbling blocks. So and so the question is, how do we get started on these projects? And getting started, it's really a question of just showing the client the visualization that can be achieved, because typically they've got in their mind that it's just another BI tool. It's not another BI tool. This is a revolutionary approach to viewing your data. So it's a goldmine of data that's sitting in a structured system like SAP, ServiceNow, Salesforce. They've all got beautifully structured data with great change logs, and process mining allows you to view that. So the big stumbling blocks are, number one, the perception that it's just another BI tool. It's not. So you've got to show people that visualization. And the reaction we've had is, once people see the visualization of the actual process in place, their minds click in straight away, and they're giving us ideas about how we can utilize this in their business. And then from a data point of view, everyone is super sensitive about privacy, about not having a data leak, because that's reputational damage. So you'll find that the large organisations, and I'll use, again, Celonis as an example, have gone to extraordinary lengths to make sure that their platform is super secure. You throw any GDPRS thing at it, and they've basically covered. So they're a German company, so you can only imagine that they have to comply with a lot of stuff in Europe. So they're all cloud related systems. And then there's two other things to consider. So generally when we start, we like to start with a proof of value. So we're not really doing a proof of concept, because proof of concept, you're trying to prove the product. Well, the product's been proven at 2,000 implementations around the world. It's whether or not we can prove that there's value for the client that we're working with. So we call it a proof of value. But we basically would provide the client with an extraction program that they need to put in their system, drops out a bunch of CSVs, and we load it up, and then we do our analysis, and that's what we call a discovery project. And then if that's successful, then we would turn that into what we want is the client to then come up to speed and actually own the tool set and have it as part of their infrastructure. And that's really where the value is gained, because we need to have the Celonis as like the brain looking at the process as it's occurring, and we need to have at least say an overnight load of the data, so that it's then so that people can take actions in Celonis and then push that back into maybe an SAP. So it could be something like, I noticed that I've got a very slow payment cycle going on in accounts payable. What's happening? I look at, I identify that the root cause is that I've got a payment block, and then I could go back into SAP and unblock that. But it's also possible, once I've identified the data, just to push it straight back in from Celonis. And you'll find that people like, Siemens, Uber, these type of companies, they're already well down the path. So in Europe, they're miles ahead. Where we're so far behind in Australia, it's not funny. We're really at the discovery point, and there's a number of clients who have purchased licenses and now have it embedded within their system in Australia, and they're starting to push ahead.
Yeah, yeah. And how does it change the role of the typical process analyst or process practitioner? Because I think using this technology, it does it has the potential to change a lot of their day-to-day work, where maybe typical or historically, as you mentioned, like sitting in a lot of workshops, getting a lot of opinions around what the process is, doing a lot of BPMN mapping and modeling. This tool set does change a lot of things. Is this how does the current process practitioners that are sitting in the centralized or decentralized BPM team, how does it change their role?
Yeah. You're talking about like the internal people or like external consulting? Yeah.
Internal people, yeah.
Yeah. So once the so if we kind of project forward from the discovery project, so the discovery projects would be run by myself and my team, but we want to bring up to speed the internal process analysts within the clients. And then they would then have a similar role to what we have for these discovery projects. And we've done lots of these type of things previously for large, SAP migration projects, where you're basically trying to understand what's going on in your process by sitting in a room and just having endless arguments. And generally they're quite political. So we Division A disagrees with Division B about how these things are done. And the beautiful thing and the great step forward for a process analyst would be if they actually had process mining in their kit bag, then the starting point would be, here's what the processes look like. Let's discuss, rather than endless arguments, wasting everyone's time about just based on opinion. So I think you get to like a much better place as a process analyst much quicker. The process modeling is still required, but we get to a much more mature discussion much more quickly. And we've done 10 of these process mining discovery projects in Australia, and they've always been really positive in the workshops, because people they're not arguing about, they're just looking at the facts and going, well, that's your data. We're just looking at your data. Yeah. So we see it as like a tremendous advantage for the internal business process analysts to get to the truth. To get to, let's not say the truth. The truth is too subjective. To get to the facts of what actually occurred in your system, because again, we're just reflecting what actually happened in your process, in your system. And so that's also an interesting one, Dan. So you talked before about data. We like to get started with a high value but with a low risk approach for our clients. And the one that we typically like to lead with, although we're open to others from the client, is procurement, because it's proven. It's been proven at 2,000 sites around the world. The savings are known. The models are robust. The way to get the data out is easy. And I can be running a workshop within 2 weeks, one week if I'm really pushed, but 2 weeks to start kicking off workshops. So the speed of actually getting on the front foot into workshops with clients and showing them the insights is really massive. Now, if you compare that to a process which is sitting in a bespoke database somewhere, I don't know what that looks like. So then you're almost back to like a classic BI project where we need to write a spec to get the data out. 3 months go past, blah blah. So getting the client started, I think, is very important, and picking a process where you can almost guarantee that it's going to be successful and the client will enjoy it and get a lot of value out of it. I think it's good, because once they then see the power and they see some of the insights, then their minds just expand about, okay, we do this and we can do those other ones, but there's a prioritization which needs to go on about, what's the value, but what's the ease of effort of actually doing that as well.
Yeah. So if an organization wanted to dive into the world of process mining, is it best that they start with a very focused process, maybe that only interacts with one or two systems, and it's quite very specific use case, or is there more value to be found looking from an end-to-end perspective with many different systems, collating that data together somehow to show all of that?
So the looking at and the end-to-end is a really interesting question. So again, we process mining typically breaks up things based on individual event logs, and so a typical event log might be procurement. Oh, sorry, let's say purchasing. So purchase orders, purchase recs, goods receipts. Another one might be accounts payable. Accounts payable, invoices, invoice payment. They're related, but we might have things in accounts payable which aren't in purchasing. So we might have just like, financial invoices. But actually, you want to be able to join those two things together. And accounts payable and procurement are actually two parts of the one end-to-end process. So we'd normally do those two together, because if you just did accounts payable, you'd be asking questions about procurement. And one of the drivers is, how do we get things paid on time, but not too early? That's what we're trying to do in accounts payable. If we broaden that out from there and looking at the procurement landscape, we might also have vendor invoice management, open text, and those type of scanning technologies, which are actually quite fascinating. Like they're just an incredible black box, which you need to expose. The only way you can expose that is with process mining. You might have upstream stuff such as Ariba and contract management systems. So you could grab all four of those and do them at once, and that would probably give you more value overall. But I'd actually recommend just to do P2P and AP to start, because we know that's going to be successful. You could add on Vim, that we've done a couple of really great ones of that before. But again, it's about how much does the client want to bite off in the first place? So our standard approach is procurement and accounts payable. We know exactly how long that's going to take. Here's a fixed price. Let's do it. It'll take 4 to 6 weeks, and we're done and dusted, right? So it's really low risk, and it's really high value for the client. And we've got tremendous learnings, let's call it that, from the clients that we've dealt with along the way. So I think you want to be thinking about, where's the big value? Big value is the whole end-to-end process, and but maybe start smaller, right? So you want to do all of this, but phase one is let's just do a discovery thing, get our feet wet, and get some good value out of that. And then phase two could be, we'll just extend it, just add on those additional things. So it's the same with any project. You got to scope it based on the available resources. And again, every extra process we add on, I need some extra SMEs from the client side. Right. So then I need more workshops. So it starts to blow out. So you got to just figure out like a logical way to get started in a effective manner, and then set the groundwork, and then grow out from there. And then you'll find that people like, Siemens and these guys in Germany, that's what they did. They basically started with a P2P AP process, and now they're running 30 processes. So they've just gone completely end to end. So again, you got to walk before you can run. To a certain extent. So that would be our. We're open to what clients would like to do, but we'd generally be recommending to start a discovery process with something that we know is going to be successful out of the box.
Yeah, no, that's great. And what would you say is, out of these 10 projects that you've been part of, or even the projects that you're aware of, what's probably the most remarkable outcome that you've been part of? Because I think that's one question that the audience has is, what's the value? There's obviously an investment there, there's a cost there, but what does the potential reward look like?
Yeah, well, you can look at any of the software vendors, and they'll give you like massive, tens, hundreds of millions of dollars of savings and better throughput and better compliance. And so they're all published things that you can have a look at. But some of the interesting things that we actually found were clients just didn't appreciate, we didn't appreciate either, just how many variants were going on in their process. So they would think, for procurement, we might have 20 different process variants, maybe 100. No. We're talking thousands, tens of thousands of different ways that a particular document can pass through. And that process variability, that's a killer from efficiency point of view. One of the other interesting things we found, and again, so all of these are about how do we feed into a program of improving the process, right? So just doing the discovery is very, very useful. but it's only the starting point, right? So we want to make changes to the process in order to deliver that value. One of the really interesting things was benchmarking, and all clients say the same things. How do we compare against other people that you've done this on? And so we have collected along the way on our travels the typical benchmarks: cycle times, automation, rework, changes, what are your three-way match rates like, what's your contract coverage, all those type of things. We've kind of collected them on our way through. But one of the really interesting things is what we call internal benchmarking. In other words, within a company, if I'm comparing two plants, we might find that Plant A is actually really, really efficient. They got 85% automation rates. Cycle time is 20 days, and then I compare it to Plant B, which should be the same, and I've got 20% automation rate. I've got it takes me 40 days to process a purchase order. What's going on there? So the internal benchmarking is actually really, really useful, because what it means is I've already got a pocket of good practice in the organisation. And the significant thing about that is that I can get these other guys to perform at the same level simply through training without having to change the configuration or do any development. It's already happening in the organisation. So from getting good value out of that, that's a fantastic one, where it's just doing some training. It's just identifying how come you guys are performing like this. Oh, that no one ever told us any different. That we've always done it that way. There might be some specific business reasons why they have to process things a certain way, but typically we're finding that it's not the configuration that's wrong. It's that people are processing the transactions in an inefficient way. It's just the way they're doing things. They didn't know that they had to do things in that particular order. So that's a good one. Another one is setting some good SLA targets. So particularly for something like sub-cycle time. So people typically look at, how long does it take to actually process a purchase order? So let's say it's 30 days, right? Within the process, there's actually there's a couple of really useful things you can do. Like from an internal point of view, you might be interested to know how long does it take to turn a purchase requisition, which is what an end user does, into a purchase order. So you and I might be end users. We put in our purchase requisitions. Please send me some pens or something like that. Then the purchasing team actually takes that, processes it, has to say, which vendor am I getting it from? Is that in stock? Do I have to order some more stuff? So that process of turning it from a purchase rec to a purchase order is a great measure of internal efficiency for the purchasing team. So typically we say, we'll give you 2 days for that. If something's taking 10 days to turn into a purchase order, we've got something seriously wrong. And then the other one that's really good is what's the difference between the actual expected delivery date and when did it actually turn up? So that's a fantastic one on your vendor. So that's a great external measure. So they're two typical ones we use. So people typically didn't have very good sub-cycle benchmarks to go for. They were just going, it's faster, it's slow. And then the other good one is in plant maintenance, which we've done a couple of gigs on that as well. And that's all about for high priority work, how quickly can we get that fixed? And they've got a lot of SLAs. So particularly if it's like in the utility space, they might have, if this is like this particular priority, then I've got 30 days to fix it. If it's this, then I've got 10. If it's urgent and the system's down, I got to get it done straight away. So the processes operate entirely differently in that. But again, to try and drive better performance, you need to have a target to measure it against, and they're missing. And so one of the nice things about process mining is it'll go, that's what your performance is at the moment. This area is, that's 30 days, that's 40 days, that's 50 days. Is that what you want for a target? Yep, that's fine. Why don't we start with that? And then anything that's an outlier you need to work on, and then you can start pushing those, maybe push them down, depends on what the SLA actually is. The other interesting thing is, so again, just talking about what do we find? We find that people aren't processing things properly. We find that the configuration is fine, but we find that they're not using enough of the existing functionality.
Right.
So particularly around automation. And so in work that we've previously done when we were at BHP, some of the best practice there, they've had their automation and procurement up to, say, 85%. It's very, very automated. And that requires certain things to be in place for that to happen. But we tend to find that there's quite a big opportunity for clients just to use more of the existing functionality as well. So there's more specific things in each of the different processes, but that's kind of at a high level. They're kind of the things that we would drive to. And then by doing those things, so we actually have to make a change to the people or the process. Sorry, not change the people, but change what the people are doing, or the process, or do some more functionality in order to drive the benefits. So the benefits will come when we do those particular things. And just talking about benefits, so we have two different kind of methodologies, if you like. One methodology is to get a well-tested, well-functioning system up and running. And the other one is what we call path to value, which is actually like a value realization methodology, which is provided by our partners, the Celonis. And that's great. And that focuses very much about identifying the things in the process that can be changed to get better benefits and helping the client build out a business case to drive the next round of process improvement. So the Celonis, the reason we like the Celonis guys, and we partnered with them from the start, is they've really thought about this, and they came from a management consulting background. So they've really got a big focus on business benefits, getting value for clients, as well as having a really groovy process mining tool.
Yeah, no, that's great. And a lot of what you were talking about then was it gives a lot of transparency in what's actually happening in the organisation. It's exposing a lot of things, and there are a lot of areas of the business, a lot of stakeholders that would be more or less involved in the process in terms of the information that we're discovering through process mining. So, do you find that there is much, if any, resistance to this approach, even though it's showing the facts? I'm assuming for some people it could stir up politics and things inside of an organisation because of what it is presenting, and some people would take the opinion that this is fantastic, this is amazing, this is what we need. Others are probably going to be like, oh no, this is going to highlight things. How do you face objections, and how do you handle or manage those objections if they come?
Yeah, we've been, I think we've been pretty lucky. I understand what you're saying, and that was kind of the thought that we had as well, that we're actually exposing existing weaknesses, and people might find that politically sensitive. Again, we need to, the sponsor of these projects is not the SAP team. It's not the technical guys. We need them on side to help us get things done. But it's basically like, it's the CFO, it's the chief procurement officer, or it's the director of maintenance who knows he's got a problem, or she's got a problem, they've got a problem. And typically what we find is at that level, they don't have deep knowledge of what's going on in SAP. They just see the symptoms of what's going on. So they're looking at, how do I make sure I haven't got late payments against small business vendors, which has just been legislated? What's my is my three-way match rate looking good? If I'm the CPO, I want to get my cycle times better. I particularly want to maximise how much spend I've got under contract. If I'm a director of maintenance, I'm interested in understanding, why can't I get my maintenance jobs done on time? What's blocking it? The purchasing guys haven't done their job, or haven't got a goods, or we don't have the stuff in stock. So they're the kind of things that people are typically looking at. Now, as long as we've got one of those sponsors who are looking for improvements to the business, then it's really just a way of presenting. We never present, look at this, it's all rubbish. We present, this is what we found in your system, please discuss. Right? So that's more just a question of, do you like to be confrontational in your workshops, or do you like to try and bring the team along? So I'm not very confrontational. I like to present the facts, show what we've seen before, and then discuss, why is this happening in your organisation? And we've found in all cases with our clients, it's just been a very, very positive outcome, because we're not trying to tell them that they don't know what they're doing. We're just trying to go, here's some extra information that you guys didn't even know. And typically, if we get to the point where client wants to do this, they're very open. They know that there's issues there. If there were no issues, there'd be no need to do this. But I'm telling you, everyone's got issues.
Yeah. And is it a no-brainer to get these sponsors on board? Like obviously this. Okay.
No.
Why not?
No. Because they're all very busy. They're very busy, and they live in a world of problems. And so we need to find the right opportunity to present to them and show them what can be done. And again, I think we spoke about this before, one of the barriers is people go, it's just another BI tool. Can you just give that to the BI team, please? And so it's very important to visualize a process for the C-level so that they can see what we can actually do that a BI tool can't. And our experience has been, once we presented it, they start giving us ideas about, could you do it on this project? And so seeing's believing, I call it. Once they see the process mining visualization, they go, oh yeah, I could really use that, because they've got problems. They've got problems, and it's just, we need to just make the leap to the point where they go, I think you guys can actually help us with this. I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds of case studies around the world of how this works, but no one ever believes, particularly in Australia. We're very cynical in Australia. It's, you got to prove it.
Yes.
I've heard this 100 times before. You got to prove it.
Yeah.
And so once we get started, it goes great. But just getting to that point, accessing the right people, that's the challenge. Really.
Yeah. And so I think, what you said earlier was, depending on the systems that you have in place, if you have SAP in place or something like that, you should be doing it. You should be doing it now.
Yeah. You should be doing it now. Every SAP client in Australia should be pursuing this technology.
Yeah,
should be pursuing. I mean, they're all interested in doing process improvements, but there's just a natural barrier to, I need your data. I'm going to put it in this platform. I'm going to run some workshops. I need you to spend some money. There's just some natural barriers to do it. There should be 400 SAP clients in Australia clamoring to do this work to improve their processes, because they'll get so much value out of it.
Yeah. And is it size dependent in terms of what organization? Like if you're a company of a small business of 10 or 50 or 100, what's the size where you can really start to get significant value out of?
So I'd say if you're a business with 10 or 50 people, you haven't got SAP. So the question is what's the system you've actually got? Again, we're focused on SAP because they're all medium size and above companies. So if you've got an SAP back end, this is relevant for you, all the way up to BHP, Rio, etc. But starting from smaller clients as well. And again, we did a small one when we were at Cloud. I'll mention the name Greens Foods, and they're only a relatively small from an SAP footprint, but the procurement and AP data that we generated for them was fantastic. So if you've got an SAP footprint, you should be doing this. That's it.
Yeah. Okay.
Again, that's another common objection. We're not big enough to need this.
Right.
But again, because Celonis have provided such great out of the box kit, and we can do this so quickly, it's cost effective even for a very small organisation to do this.
Yeah. Okay. And what does the future look like for this space over the next, say, 2, 3, 5 years' time? Because I mean, there's, as you mentioned, there's a lot of organisations that haven't even started. There should be 400, SAP organisations that are diving into this, but there isn't at this point. But what does the next 2, 3, 5 years look like from a technology point of view? How are we going to see it evolve? What trends are you noticing?
Yeah, so one thing from so as you say, I think we'll start to follow more of so Europe, it's already gone blockbuster. The US as well has really gone big. There's been a lot of discovery projects that have been done. And so the next phase over the next couple of years, it's going to move into, yep, I actually need to get a license and I actually need to embed this in the organisation to drive the improvements. So the discovery projects are fantastic. They're worth doing even by themselves for the transparency and the understanding. But to really drive the big dollar values, you need to have this embedded within your organisation. You need to have your users using this on a daily basis. So that's what we're going to see from a take-up point of view. From a technology point of view, there's a couple of interesting things going on. One is, as I said before, we've currently got existing kind of single stream processes. So procurement, accounts payable, order to cash, accounts receivable, plant maintenance, production, customer service. They're the typical big ones in an SAP environment, and they're kind of sitting by themselves. But Celonis guys have actually built a multi-event log capability, which means a couple of examples that we'd use there is if I was doing order to cash, I might be interested to join that with my procurement if I was actually purchasing materials in to see where the blockages are. A couple that we're working on with clients at the moment is when we do accounts payable, what's the upstream blockage in procurement? Stopping me from actually paying things. So, I haven't done a goods receipt. That's a classic one there. And then another one that we're working on at the moment is for plant maintenance. The maintenance guys, they schedule their work, and in order to do that, they either need to have a person do something, or they need to get a part, and the part's either in stock or it's not in stock and it needs to be ordered. And so that's actually like a blockage for a lot of the enterprise asset management systems, that the upstream procurement is actually creating a blockage for those. So we'll see that multi-event log. That's going to be an absolute blockbuster. We've got a couple of those working at the moment. And the third one is a typical thing we hear from clients is, that's great. All that data, it's in SAP. It's nicely structured. But what about the stuff that's outside? So the stuff that's outside is, if you and I were users and we're logging on to SAP, that's recorded in SAP when I hit the post button. But if I then have to go, which vendor will I use? I think I'll go and do a bit of Googling on these guys. That's not captured. So there's a new functionality called task mining, which can actually then look at what's occurring on an individual user's laptop, and it can capture clicks and websites and all those kind of things. So there's some good security privacy functions as well to say, no, you can't look at that, you can't look at that, can't look at that. But what that will do, it'll actually then create an event log that can be loaded into Celonis, and you can see what's happening from an individual user point of view. So a little bit more like the old, Taylor time and motion studies approach, or, I think the lean guys use this quite a lot. So that's probably the other big one. And the thing we'll see is again, as I said before, moving from just a discovery project to actually having it embedded and action. That's where the value is. That's where clients are going to get massive improvements in their process. So this isn't about just doing discovery projects. This is about how does a client improve, and they've got to change something in order to improve. It doesn't just happen by looking at a few reports.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's great. And if you're listening to this conversation, I want to encourage you, if you haven't explored process mining, start now. Start digging around, looking at different resources, talking to the right people, talking to practitioners like Geoff himself to understand how you can start to walk in this direction. But I guess just on that one, Geoff, where for those that have gleaned a lot from this conversation, albeit how short it is, where do they go now to continue learning more, and I guess specifically how it can apply to their organisation?
Yeah, so in the words of Adam Bant, who's the leader of the Greens in Australia, just Google it. So you'll find that there's tons of great stuff on Google from about process mining. A couple of things, if you're interested from a technical point of view, then look up Professor Wil van der Aalst. He's basically the guru. He basically invented this terminology. And if you're a technical geek, you might even want to do his MOOC course. That's fantastic. I'd have a look on I'm the Celonis guy, but I'd have a look on their website because they've got lots of fantastic material. They've even got free training as well, if you're interested. So they're really encouraging people the user base to engage with Celonis and get their skills up to scratch. Now, the other thing, Dan, is there's also a nice document you might want to make available to your readers called Process Mining for Dummies. And the Process Mining for Dummies, it was sponsored by Celonis, but it's process mining related, and it's just it's fantastic introductory document. So if any of your listeners want to get a hold of that, I can give you a copy of that as well.
Great. Awesome. And if they want to connect with you personally, and maybe you've left them with a few sort of outstanding questions that they want answered.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So just check out tech150.com. There's links there, or Geoff.Armstrong@tech150.com. Always happy to hear from people. And even if you just want to ring up, have a chat like this one about what's happening in the world of process mining and see whether it's appropriate for your organisation. That's always number one. Scope it out. Is this going to be good? If you're an SAP client, I already know the answer to that. But again, all clients have different, if they got, where are they in their budget cycle? Or have they got too many things going on? They don't have the people to be involved. So they've got to find like the right point in time to actually engage. But always happy for people to reach out, Dan.
Yeah, perfect. Great. Well, thanks so much for the conversation, Geoff. I've certainly been gleaning a lot. I know it's a hot topic that needs a lot of clarity around it, because some people are doing it well, some people aren't doing it well, and so it's a good thing to discuss. So thanks so much for sitting down with me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
No worries. Thanks very much.